Most great powers were born in blood. Conquest, betrayal, lies told to their own people. Their moral compass, abandoned long ago. The United States overthrew governments for resources. The Soviet Union crushed its neighbors to build a buffer. China used debt and intimidation to buy influence. All of them learned the same brutal truth. In the game of power, strength matters more than virtue. And even with unlimited money and time, it still takes a century or more to become a true superpower. But then there's India. No puppet states, no colonies, no massive alliance system propping it up. In less than a decade, it built one of the most feared air forces on Earth. It doesn't make sense. It breaks the rules of the superpower playbook. So how did India pull off the impossible? And why does the world still refuse to believe it? Welcome back to DeepRise Theory. Today, we dive into the rise of the Indian Air Force and what it reveals about the real power. Let's start with this question. Why do most nations fail to become superpowers? Because they're not willing to pay the cost. They hesitate to compromise their values. They don't want to forge alliances with tyrants. They're not ruthless enough to crush enemies before they can fight back. That's the history of the United States, which toppled elected governments in Iran, Chile, and beyond. The Soviet Union invaded its neighbors and forced them into a puppet alliance. China spent decades stealing technology, bullying neighbors, and building artificial islands to project force. That's the real price of power. But India chose a different path. And for decades, that choice came at a cost. Rewind to the 1960s and 70s. India's Air Force fought several wars with Pakistan. Back then, its doctrine was purely Soviet style, heavy on ground forces, less emphasis on air dominance. Meanwhile, Pakistan went all in on NATO standards. They trained with the US, flew American Sabres, ran exercises with Iran and Turkey. They knew Western tactics. But here's where it gets even crazier. During the Arab-Israeli wars, over 900 Soviet-made aircraft were destroyed by Israeli pilots. Israel was unstoppable. But in the dogfights where Israeli jets were shot down, the pilots weren't Arab regulars. They were Pakistani volunteers flying Syrian MiG-21s. Let that sink in. The same MiG-21 India relied on heavily. Pakistani pilots were training on both Western and Soviet tech. They had experience fighting the most advanced air force in the region. They knew India's capabilities inside and out. And in the skies over the subcontinent, that experience gave tea. By the 1990s, India realized it had to change. The world was evolving. Air power was the future. So in the early 2000s, India took a huge gamble. It signed a massive contract with Russia to co-develop a next-gen multi-role fighter. The plan? Build something as powerful as America's F-15E, using the Russian flanker as a base. The result? The Su-30 NKI. It was a beast. Agile, powerful, loaded with tech. But here's the twist no one talks about. It wasn't the jet itself that transformed the Indian Air Force. In fact, it was the betrayal behind it. Because while India poured billions into the project hoping for self-reliance, Russia was using India's money to develop their own next-gen jets. When India tried to produce the Su-30 domestically, the cost was higher than buying it directly from Russia. Imagine that. You pay for the research, you pay for the tech transfer, and you still get ripped off. Who does that to an ally? Turns out America did something similar to Japan during the F-2 program. So maybe India shouldn't have been surprised. But here's the key moment. India learned. One thought echoed across its entire defense establishment. We must build everything at home. That single decision transformed India's defense industry. From missiles to fighter jets to radar systems, everything. India poured money, talent, and political will into building self-reliance. Let's talk about one of its crown jewels, the Astra missile. The latest version has a range of 340 kilometers. That surpasses China's PL-15, which is used by Pakistan. But range isn't everything. The Astra's seeker system is state-of-the-art. If it loses its target due to jamming or terrain, it can reacquire and destroy it anyway. Meanwhile, India recovered fully intact PL-15 missiles from battlefields, missiles that failed to even explode. That's not a weapon, that's an expensive metal stick. And India didn't stop with missiles. Take the Tejas. It's not just a light fighter. It's a superb training platform that preps pilots for fifth-generation jets, arguably the most advanced in its class. Then there's the AMCA, India's upcoming stealth fighter. If it succeeds, it won't just be India's pride. It'll disrupt the global arms market forever. So, how strong is the Indian Air Force really? It's not just about planes. It's about the entire ecosystem. The Su-30 MKI, customized for Indian needs with Israeli, French and Russian tech blended seamlessly. The Rafale, stealthy, deadly, networked with NATO standard protocols. A reliable aerial refueling fleet. A vast AWACS network that gives India eyes over the entire subcontinent. Advanced electronic warfare units capable of jamming enemy fighters and blinding radars for hundreds of kilometers. And then there's the most important factor of all, the pilots. Indian pilots regularly train with NATO, with the US, with France, even Israel, which flies the same F-16s as Pakistan. That's not training for regional conflicts. That's preparing for global ones. Today, India doesn't plan for Pakistan. It plans for China. That's the level. And that's why India is now ranked 4th in global air power. Not because it's rich, but because it's smart. So what's the real secret to military power? Most people think it's money. And sure, that helps. But if money alone made you powerful, Saudi Arabia would be the world's #1 military power. They spend billions. They have massive armies. But they fear a tiny country like Israel. Why? Because the real answer is brains, strategy, discipline, and a willingness to learn from betrayal and failure. India's defense story is one of constant reinvention. Betrayed by allies? Learn. Overcharged? Build it yourself. Outmatched in tactics? Train with the best. Lacking experience? Join global exercises. That's the real path to power. And India is walking it. If you've watched this far, thank you. Smash that like button if you believe knowledge is power. Comment below. What do you think is India's most impressive defense achievement? Subscribe to DeepRise Theory for deep dives into military strategy, geopolitics, and the psychology of power. Share this video with someone who underestimates India. Let's spread the truth together. Because in the end, India's journey proves one thing. If you think smart, plan patiently, and learn relentlessly, you can achieve in 10 years what others can't in a century. Thanks for watching DeepRise Theory. See you in the next one.